Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Planning Committee. I am Councillor Ellis Brown and I will be chairing most of this evening's meeting. I shall be supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor Peter van der Boer, and the professional officers. Thank you for attending. May I remind members of the public this is not a public meeting, but a meeting at which the public are present. Therefore, it's not a forum for the public to ask questions or challenge the points raised during the debate by officers or members of the committee. You must also not try and engage with the members or call out during the meeting. If you've requested to speak when invited to do so, please take your allotted time, which is 3 minutes. Your comments must also be material in planning terms to the decision being considered. We are not expecting a fire drill, so you should, if you hear the alarm, please make your way to the nearest fire exit, which is over on the left or in the back corner, and you should assemble outside the Lind Cross Public House. May I also ask council members and members of the public to please switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent, and remember to turn on your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you're finished. On the microphone issue this evening, one of the members of the public is hard of hearing, so please, when you are speaking, members, could you make sure directly into the microphone so that they can hear what is being said. Thank you. When your members are voting, please ensure you raise your arms clearly so that we can capture the vote accurately. Before we proceed, could the officers here this evening please introduce themselves, starting with the officers on my right.
I'm Guy Everest, the applications team leader.
Good evening, Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
Claire Brown, Principal Planning Solicitor.
Melissa Stallard, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, we do. We have apologies from Councillor Mike Croker, but Councillor Nicholas Marks is substituting for him. Councillor Jane Mercer, apologies. Councillor Clive Trott, apologies. Councillor Claire Vickers is not here, but she has asked Richard Landieu to be her substitute.
Thank you very much. Declarations of members in, sorry, I'm jumping ahead, minutes of the Planning South Committee held on the 15th of April this year. Do we agree they are an accurate reflection of the meeting? All those agree? Agreed. Thank you very much. Declaration of members' interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Franklin. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, item number 7. I know very well one of the neighbours who may or may not be affected by that planning application and has objected to it and written in. I feel I'm not really in a position to join the debate or vote on that.
Okay, thank you. If you could note that. Thank you very much. Any other declarations? No? Okay, thank you. Announcements. I have a couple of announcements. The planning meeting on the 3rd of June will be starting at 6:30 p.m. as opposed to 5:30. The chamber doors this evening will remain open in case we all get locked in, apparently, so they will remain open this evening. And I've all reiterated that when making your announcements, please speak directly into the microphone so that we can all hear clearly. Thank you. Moving on to the first application, agenda item number 5, which is DC 241811. I could ask the officer to make the presentation, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, this application relates to a site in the north of the A281 on the edge of Bucks Green, where outline planning permission is sought for the residential development of the site. The site is adjoined to the south and east by existing housing and was last used as a pig farm, with some structures remaining present on the site. These are some views east and west along the A281 which show the existing frontage of the site and its relationship with surrounding development. It's worth noting on this slide that the majority of trees along the road frontage are subject to a tree preservation order. And this is a closer view of the existing access in the lay-by, and it's also worth noting beyond the with the blue car in the distance is an existing bus stop. The site is outside the settlement boundary of Bucks Green, which is identified by the blue line, and members' attention is drawn to paragraph 6.3 of the report, which incorrectly refers to the built-up area of Rudgwick. The site has not been allocated for housing in the current local plan, and a residential development would not be essential to the countryside location. The proposal does therefore conflict with the current local plan. There are, though, a number of considerations which weigh in favour of the scheme, including that the council is currently unable to meet a 5-year housing land supply with a current supply of 1 year. In light of this position, the council's Facilitating Appropriate Development document, the FAD, sets out a series of criteria against which housing proposals are considered, and these are set out in paragraph 6.10 of the report. The site immediately joins the built-up area boundary of Bucks Green, and the proposal is considered to meet the criteria for settlement expansion set out in the FAD. The suitability of a site for development is further reflected by an allocation in the draft local plan, where policy HA14 identifies the application site as RD2, so in the bottom right corner of the orange hatching, with a larger neighbour allocation as RD1. This is the draft text for policy HA14, which identifies RD2, which is the application site, for up to 6 homes. It is considered that the current 5-year housing land supply position, the proposal's compliance with the FAD, and the draft local plan allocation are such that the principal development on this site should be supported. The application is outlined with all matters reserved, but is accompanied by an indicative layout plan. The plan indicates that the development would use the existing access, which is shown by the blue line, with the existing bus stop in red, and the location of those two would ensure no conflict between the two as required by the draft local plan policy. There are no reasons why an acceptable layout, scale, appearance and landscaping could not be secured for your future reserve matters application, with water neutrality secured through condition. It is therefore recommended that outline planning permission be granted as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. There are no registered speakers for this item, and apologies, I should have made it clear at the outset that we are not following normal. But what happened previously is I won't be going to the ward councillors first or at the end of the debate. So I open it up to debate for the members. Anyone wish to comment on the application? Yes, Councillor Landeroux.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As it happens, I am the ward member. Referring to HA14, which we've just shown on the screen, and which shows that we have 2 sites in the emerging plan adjacent to each other. One RD1, which is in the plan stating 60 homes, and the other RD2, which is the former pig farm with 6 homes, which are coming forward for outline tonight. One of the problems that we see in the future is access to one or both of these sites. In the policy H14, it did state that as adjacent sites, the council would support RD1 and RD2 coming forward as a comprehensive scheme. Unfortunately, the developers on each don't appear to have got together on this. So what we're going to have possibly, and RD1, the developer there, I think is Welbeck Homes, are coming forward with either a scheme for 70 houses or around about 110 houses. They're currently engaging with the parish council. I'm not sure whether they've come forward to officers for pre-app, but their scheme at the moment shows an entrance about 50 metres away from the pig farm, almost opposite the entrance to the playing fields. So we're going entrances 50 metres apart, one with possibly 110 homes coming through onto the A281. And my question to you really is, I know we're only looking at this tonight, we can't look at both, but is there a way, bearing in mind that at the moment we're just looking at a outline planning permission and all matters being reserved, is there a way that we can get a joint access for both of these sites?
So although policy HA 14 says that the council would support a comprehensive scheme for both sites, it doesn't require a comprehensive scheme for both sites. And I think because the development on the pig farm, it's an enclosed site with clear boundaries from HA1, from RD1, the rest of the development site. There's no reason to think the development of RTD, or the application site in isolation of a larger allocation, would prejudice access or the delivery of housing on RD1. So the two can be considered separate entities. In terms of the access, any future planning application for RD1 would ensure safe access as part of that development, and that would have to take into account any outline planning permission on RD2 at that time. So at the moment, it would be premature to consider access requirements for RD1 in the absence of any approved development or planning application.
Yeah, I understand that we're only looking at RD2 tonight, but this is going to be a problem in the future and fairly soon, because obviously we'll be coming forward with an application for the, and a lot more houses than the 60. So we are going to have a problem on the 281 with these two accesses.
All right.
If you could turn your one off, please. Yeah.
Oh, that's come on. Sorry. Yeah, so because RD2 is outlined, although we have details of access, access is a reserved matter. So we could add an informative to recommend the applicant liaise with the site owners for RD1 in terms of the access, so that when the future reserved matters application comes in, it could potentially have regard for development proposals and the wider allocation.
Well, I think we'd be very grateful if you could do that. If we could get them to talk together, would be something. Thank you very much. As regards the site application that we're looking at tonight, I would be happy if I had a vote to vote for approval. I'm sure that the local residents on the opposite side of the road there would love to see some market houses in line with Rudgwick's neighbourhood plan policies sitting over there instead of the eyesore that they've been looking at for the last 20 years. It has caused problems of flooding and pollution, which I'm concerned about. The owner has tried on several occasions to build on what would be a traveller site with 6 static caravans. On each occasion, his application has been refused, generally because there's insufficient information. I'm concerned that this application, when the details are known, might be of similar ilk. I'm also concerned that like the parish council, that the water neutrality proposal isn't sound, because it doesn't appear to cover all the water on the site. However, I do note all the conditions that you've put in your report and look forward to seeing the detailed plan.
Thank you very much. Okay. Melissa, could you capture in the minutes the point on the informative? Okay, thank you very much. I don't know who was first, but I'll go with Councillor Clark first.
Thank you, Chairman. A list of questions here. Basically, I read through paragraph 6.1 and the objections, and the application was refused previously and what that was for. I understand that quite well. But if I move on to paragraph 6.10, it goes into the discussion about the FAD. And yeah, okay, so the site adjoins an existing settlement edge, etc. So the first 2 points, okay, get that. Third point, it doesn't meet local housing needs because it's not in line with the housing needs as far as I've read in the documentation. So is there not a contradiction there? And is this not a problem? Because it doesn't meet the, so therefore I don't understand how we can have a sweeping endorsement of this as in paragraph 6.13. So maybe that's the first point you can address. The point that the ward member made, I want to elaborate a bit on because I can understand the concern. Now, in this particular case, because the applications are quite small, it's probably less of a problem. But generally speaking, what we've seen in Mid-Sussex, for example, is developers deliberately go out to do little sites and things because that way they don't have to cough up for infrastructure, sill and the rest of it. They can reduce their costs. So in this particular case, it doesn't apply, but I think it's worth bearing in mind, bearing what the local councillor said, is a separation of two sites might impact the infrastructure delivery and the things that development would normally bring if it was a bigger site. Now, obviously, a bigger site would have impact. I think possibly not in this case, but I think it's certainly something we need to bear in mind for the future. There is a bit that I do not understand, which is in paragraph 6.57. We recently got legal opinion that basically said that even if there wasn't a local plan, that provided the neighbourhood plan was roughly in the same direction and same thrust as the existing district plan, that therefore the neighbourhood plan had a lot of weight. If I read this paragraph, it seems to sort of say that the neighbourhood plan doesn't have a lot of weight, or maybe I've misunderstood it. So can you please explain? It doesn't contain housing allocations, so there's no conflict with neighbourhood plan, but neighbourhood plan had an allocation and had plans for these pieces of land. So I'm a bit confused. Thank you, Chairman. That's my questions, and maybe somebody can explain those points.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so in terms of the housing mix, because the application's outlined, we don't know the scale of the development or the bedrooms in each unit. So it would be as part of the reserve matters application, we would have to make sure that the housing mix being delivered met the aims of the neighbourhood plan. So it's a reserve matter stage consideration rather than an outline consideration. In terms of the infrastructure requirements, a development of up to 6 houses on the site would accord with the draft allocation, and it would still, the SIL regulations would still be relevant to it, so it would still be securing SIL for infrastructure within the parish as a whole. In terms of a neighbourhood plan, it is of weight, but because it doesn't include specific housing allocations, the tilted balance in the MPPF still applies to residential development outside of a settlement boundary.
Yeah, okay, fine. I get the point. But then the issue is, if it's an outline planning permission, and therefore you don't have a definition of the number of room, the mix, then how can it meet the FAD? Because you've not defined what the mix is. But the statement basically says, yeah, the FAD's fine, tick it, move on.
Well,
It isn't.
Well, I think the point is there's no reason to refuse. It's not a reason to refuse it, is it? Because ultimately, in principle, it could achieve that. And ultimately, it would be assessed at reserve matters phase in terms of the exact mix. And obviously, if it didn't comply, that would be considered at that time. But in principle, it can deliver it. There's no barrier to it. And the reserve matters would secure that. So ultimately, you can't refuse it for that reason. But I do see what you're saying, Councillor Clark. But I guess we can't refuse it for that reason, I think, is the conclusion.
Thank you. I'd hate to be accused of nitpicking.
Councillor Franklin, yes, you had your...
Yes, I feel I just wanted to support one of the points that Councillor Landahoo made regarding the graded development. That piece of road is extremely busy with the road, the traffic coming out of the Haven and from the Lockswood turning, etc. And it's probably not pertinent to this particular application, but I feel I need to just support that point that when that full development takes place, safe access will, as always, need to be very clearly considered, because I think it's extremely busy, that road.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to comment on this particular application? Councillor Trollope, yes.
Thank you. On the same theme, and I'm sorry, I tried to research it, but what is the speed limit of that main road in that area? And if it's not 30 or 20, is it possible to put in an advisory at least to WSCC?
See if we can confirm the speed limit there.
We haven't got that information within the report. It's not something officers know off the top of our heads. Ultimately, as we've advised, the access is reserved. So, you know, the reserved matters would have to demonstrate that the access is acceptable for the speed limit with the visibility displays required. So, you know, that full assessment of the acceptability of the access would happen at reserved matter stage. Usually, we are considering access at outline stage, but for this particular application, the applicant has chosen to reserve all matters. So we are not considering the technical details of the access at this stage. Thank you.
I'm not sure who was first over here.
It's the same.
Okay.
Just wanted to pick up on what was just said about speeding in 281 through Rudwick or through Bucks Green. There was something in 2017 where we had an application where Highways actually decided they didn't like it. They actually said at that time that Bucks Green is surrounded by 40-mile speed limits or slower speed roads, and there's no evidence that these have led to adherence of the 30-mile speed limit on the Guildford Road. So there's 30 already, and we've got far more evidence since then because we've had speed watch and we've got traffic calming statistics from SIDS on either end of that piece of road going through the village. So yeah, it's a major problem speeding through there, and not really looking forward to possibly up to 250 more cars being in the village coming off of that bigger development.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lambert, did you want to?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I was given to understand by the local ward member that it is 30 at that point. It's 30 by the Fox. It is 30 miles an hour, though, which was the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments at all? No? Okay. And for that, therefore, I will go to the vote. And remind Councillor Landry, I know you're unable to vote. The recommendation for this is to approve outline planning permission subject to appropriate conditions as set out in the committee report. Therefore, I propose that we vote on this, and those for the application, please show.
Unanimous.
That's unanimous, therefore the application is approved. Moving on to the next agenda item, DC 240256. This agenda item, I will be stepping down as chair, and the vice chair will be taking the chair for this particular item. The reason being that if there is a tied vote, then the chair can have that deciding, or the vice chair has the deciding vote. So I'll hand over to the vice chair for this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So DC 240256. Can we have the presentation, please?
This application relates to the proposed extension of an existing gypsy site on land to the south of Pighurst Lane. As existing, the site accommodates 2 static caravans with associated buildings and vehicles. And these are some photos of the site as existing. The application proposes an additional 2 static caravans and a new stable building. On this proposed plan, the existing structures are shown by the white outline, with the proposed new buildings and hardstanding the coloured sections of the site. The application was deferred by Planning Committee South on 10th of March for further information to be submitted in respect of drainage. A drainage strategy was subsequently submitted on the 31st of March. This drainage strategy proposes use of a packaged treatment plant for foul water, and this is shown by the brown dashed lines leading to the red hatched area on the proposed drainage plan. For surface water, permeable paving is proposed, with the blue dashed lines showing the drainage route. Both foul and surface water would be discharged into an existing ditch which runs along the southern boundary of the site, and the junction of the two is shown by the intersection of the red line and the blue line in the bottom corner of the current layout plan. The Council's drainage consultant has raised no objection to this proposed approach and has advised that additional details can be secured for a pre-commencement condition, and this forms part of the recommendation. This approach is considered sufficient to ensure the development would be properly drained. The remaining considerations continue to be as set out in the original committee report, which has been included as part of the current agenda, and it is again recommended that planning permission be granted.
Thank you. We got 2 speakers on this item. Moira Foot, please. 3 minutes, please, Moira.
Good evening, Chairman, councillors. I'm speaking once again on behalf of the Tote and Pithingdean Preservation Society. Not an easy job, but somebody's got to do it. I'm only speaking about drainage, as I'm sure you've all read my email. So it'll be a much shorter speech. Now, we're all very familiar with this site and the concerns we have with this application. The HDC drainage team had asked Ben Kirk, the applicant's agent, 3 times over the course of a year for a full drainage strategy. Each time the information supplied was insufficient. Finally, on March 31st this year, a 25-page report was produced by AGEA with further details, but it is still incomplete. We therefore cannot agree with Horsham District Council, who state that a full drainage strategy has now been provided. Reading Horsham's drainage team's response to this report, it clearly says more information is still required. There are 2 out of the 16 conditions relating to drainage, numbers 3 and 4. The local residents and other objectors feel this information should have already been provided up front for the councillors who are making this decision, local residents and objectors to see. The existing method of drainage has not been investigated by AGEA, but they have assumed surface water drains by gravity into the nearby ditch on the southern boundary where flooding has previously occurred. They say more investigation would be needed on this ditch. They also state they did not do a site visit. None of the plans shown on a location for a muck heap, which should be situated at least 10 metres from a watercourse to reduce runoff and pollution. The water neutrality report shows a different plan for the 25-metre stable block to the plan produced by AGEA, which is correct. There is a public water distribution main within this site. No work should be undertaken within 4 metres of this without written permission from Southern Water. Southern Water have made no comment on this application, Are they even aware of it? HDC make no mention of this in their list of 16 conditions. Research has shown rainwater harvesting systems may become less reliable and efficient in the face of changing climate patterns, leading to reduced water savings with increased periods of tank emptiness, with more reliability on mains water. There are 7 ponds within 500 metres of Parsonsfield. Parsonsfield is within the red impact zone for the Great Crested Newt. No eDNAs have been carried out. Finally, could I ask the councillors to look at the front page of the batch report, where they will find a photograph taken in March 24 of the ground conditions at Parsonsfield, clearly showing infiltration is impossible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moira. Carol Houston, please.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman, councillors. I'm Carol Houston. I live in Whitehall Cottage, a stage 2 listed building, which is a short distance from this property. My stables are within feet of the first building. I can hear, smell everything they are doing. 3 government inspectors have said that this is the wrong place for a site. The last one only approved it due to lack of alternatives provided by Horsham District Council. The lane, Pickus Lane, which is at sea level, has mostly a countryside hedge, which grows. So at some stage of the year, it is narrow. When it has been cut in January, you get an extra 12 to 10 feet. So yes, it is dangerous with passing places. The ditches on this lane are very deep for water removal. The water drains from Blackgate Lane down into the stream behind Parsonsfield. Drainage. My land is at the bottom of the valley and floods with water coming down from Brinsbury. My neighbour has a deep ditch on her boundary, and the water ends up going under my property just before Parsonsfield stables. Although we have installed a lot of drainage by the house, fields and stables, we still have problems. I have on my phone photos as proof of flooding dated the 24th of February 2025. We have had written complaints from Mr. Oakley and verbal complaints blaming us on their flooding. I guess we have been planning for a small barn, but Farm and I are on the wrong side of the lane. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. Just hand back to the officers.
Just to pick up on a few points, and firstly, obviously, to note that the previous resolution did relate solely to drainage, but I've tried to incorporate some of the comments in this response. So, typically for new stable buildings, we can add a condition which requires details of muck storage and disposal. This doesn't currently form part of the recommendation, I think potentially because it was an existing paddock and existing horse activity, but given the potential concentration of horses within the stable building, if members are minded to approve permission, an additional condition could be added to secure details of muck storage and disposal prior to any use of the stable building. In terms of southern water, the council don't hold any records of water mains crossing the site, but if any are found which would potentially be impacted by the development, it would be for the applicant to arrange for their diversion with southern water, and that would be a separate consent process outside the scope of a planning application. In terms of newts, the council did consult Nature Space as part of the application, who raised no objection in relation to the impact on newts, and their comments at paragraph 3.7 do recommend that an informative would be added to any permission about the precautionary approach and future impact on newts, and that informative would form part of any decision to approve permission on the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any members like to contribute? Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I won't be voting on this, but I will not spare my comments. The first point I'd like to make is that the report, as stated, is not entirely correct. The application was deferred by Planning Committee South for the following reason: the drainage, which I raised amongst others. But there was another issue raised, which has been somewhat dismissed in 5.6, because there was concerns about the horses and grazing for horses, etc. And if you look at the amount of land there, I think from memory, a horse needs about 1.5 hectares or whatever it is, to graze a horse. I don't know how many horses are going to be in those stables, but there's nowhere to keep the horses, which is the whole reason for being. I also refer to the previous report, which actually talks about the plot as it was, but in fact the plot that we're looking at is basically smaller, so there's nowhere to keep the horses. So I think that's an important factor. Our officers have not received a satisfactory answer for drainage, so effectively we're in the same place as we were when we deferred it the last time. So we've received a bit more information, but not much. I don't understand why we couldn't have had all of the information. Our officers are confident that it can be dealt with by pre-commencement conditions. Pre-commencement conditions rely on people doing as they have been asked or are meant to do. This site and the applicants have a very clear history of not following the rules, of not obeying planning principles, and effectively suiting themselves to do what they want, as can be proven on another site next door where there's an illegal encampment. So I don't have any confidence that imposing a pre-commencement condition is going to cut the ice. I really don't think. I mean, officers will say that they are confident, but I really don't feel happy about it. I don't think it's strong enough. Or if there's a precondition in it, it needs to be very clearly specified as to inspection and follow-up, not just left like it is. The other thing is, I'm glad to note that the bat lighting, so to speak, is properly covered in the conditions. That's positive. So all in all, I know that we don't have the number of gypsy travel sites, but this site has a long and poisonous history to go with it, going back at least 15 to 20 years. And I'm concerned in terms of the amenity for the local people. I'm concerned about that this is a low-lying area that floods, which is why I brought up the drainage. The drainage has not been addressed. So there's no reason why we should pass it, despite the fact that officers say there's a pre-commencement condition. I don't have the confidence that our systems will deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to pick up on the issue of the stables and the horses, I think the acreage requirements for horses are partly to prevent overgrazing of horses and potential landscape and land harm. In this case, if there isn't sufficient grazing for horses, it would be for the applicant to bring in food and feed onto the site to sustain the horses. We couldn't demonstrate, and it wouldn't be necessary for us to consider potential animal welfare issues as part of this planning application, because that would be covered by separate legislation. And in terms of exercising, we couldn't presume that a paddock or horse walker or sand school facilities wouldn't be available either on the site or in the vicinity of a site for exercise. So I don't think we can reasonably raise stabling and available paddock area as a reason to refuse the application. In terms of the pre-commencement conditions and the potential for breaches, I think that's always the case with the pre-commencement condition. But in those cases, the council does have enforcement powers to serve a breach condition notice or stop notices to remedy any potential harm arising from unauthorised development taking place. And in this case, any development on the site in breach of a drainage condition would probably invalidate the permission as well. So there's always that potential end situation. In terms of a drainage, the scheme we have outlines the most appropriate way of dealing with foul and surface water drainage on the site. And although it needs further refinement in terms of the details of runoff rates and flow rates, the condition is specifically geared towards securing that information before development commences. And in terms of other elements of a drainage strategy, like the package treatment plant, that would also require building regulations approval. The discharge into a ditch would also need further consent from a lead local flood authority. So there's all various tranches of consents required to implement a drainage strategy, all of which are geared towards ensuring the site would be properly drained.
Yeah, the critical phase in that was pre-commencement. This is already there. A lot of it is already there.
So the static caravan, the
And you
additional...
haven't addressed muck, by the way.
Oh, well, I don't know what to say about muck. So,
You did.
oh, we can add a condition. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So this application, the additional static caravans in the stable building, my understanding aren't on site at the moment. So that part of the development isn't retrospective.
It's the development to the west.
Yeah, it's the western part of the site.
What's outside of this?
Councillor.
I'm just seeking clarification. Is there in close proximity another illegal, unapproved site, and is it by the same landowner? Because if it were the same landowner, then I would try to see what sort of weight we can give that information in terms of our decision.
Yeah, sorry, so the screen behind you, not ideal, shows the western land parcel, which my understanding has been sold off to separate applicants, and the picture bottom right shows the unauthorised development. So that's subject to the current application, which is under consideration. But as it's unauthorised, it's not necessary to consider the cumulative impact as part of this application because there isn't one that's before us at the present time.
But they were the same landowner, or are they the same landowner?
The western parcel of land used to be the same ownership. It used to be like a paddock, I think. So it's been sold off to separate owners now. So it's not
as part of this process?
No, so the western parcel is a separate planning application, not connected to this current application.
So we're not able to give that information any weight in our decision?
About that western parcel isn't before us today, no.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Marks.
Nevertheless, in support of Councillor Short's observation, it would be useful to know the progress of the council's compliance team, their actions against unauthorised development, because that might set some kind of precedent, knowing how far what you can do before the council turn up and tell you to stop. Basically, I think that's kind of what Councillor Short was getting at.
Might I come in, Chair, and suggest that we don't actually consider things that are in separate ownerships, and we don't look at things that are subject to compliance elsewhere. We need to determine the current application on the information that's available in the report and has been presented by officers this evening.
There you heard it. So we'll move on if anybody would like to bring something else up.
Sorry,
Unrelated.
No, unfortunately related, sorry. I mean, just to follow up on that point, the thing that I'm getting at is if they are, quote, the colloquial expression, playing the game, you know, they sell it off because they know that therefore it makes it unrelated, and therefore it just seems to be playing the system, and it makes it have a certain distaste in my mouth to have to not consider it as part of the application if they were, you know, in fact, the same owners up until, you know, this process began.
Just to be clear, land ownership is not a material planning ground. So land ownership is not material to planning, but they are separate sites and separate ownership. But ownership is not a planning matter. You know, this application is before you first. The other application is separate to this and is under separate consideration. If this application is granted, obviously that becomes a material consideration on the one next door because it would have been granted. But at this very moment in time, neither are granted, and this one is before you first. So, we're not, you know, there isn't a permission on the other side for you to consider in combination of. If that makes sense, councillors.
It does, and I think the legal advice is pretty clear. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. Just clarification, please. We've just been told that the unauthorised development is being investigated, but it's a different site. But 5.6 says the presence of unauthorised development on the site is currently being investigated by the council's compliance team. So is that referring to this site that we're considering now, or the adjoining site?
Yeah, apologies for any ambiguity. It's considering the site subject of its separate application, DC 250317. So it's not this application site, it's the neighbouring site. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, we mentioned about a precondition or a condition for muck storage and disposal. There's quite a few horses can be stabled here on a small piece of land, and the positioning of the muck heaps and related water dispersal from it needs to be carefully thought out, I would thought. Can that be put in as a precondition, or would it be a condition before occupation?
Yeah, we tend to do it prior to occupation of a stable building, so development can take place, it just can't be occupied yet. And as part of any disc application for muck storage, we would consult environmental health. And what the details we tend to get for those sorts of conditions tends to be a sealed metal container, which is taken away from site and a new one dropped off as empty, and so on. Yeah.
But as it stands, that is not a condition yet. But we can have that put in. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is about the drainage that runs through the site, and you've had a large and very detailed report now, but it didn't include some information which you mentioned was runoff rates and flow rates. Can you just confirm that those are pretty standard measurements to have included, and also if there is anything else missing? Thank you.
So the report outlines restricting flow rates into the ditch to 1 litre per second, so that you're not getting a sudden influx of water during like rain events or things like that. But the detailed specification for that isn't yet available. So it's the outline of a scheme which would drain development, but the actual means of constructing it and delivering it isn't yet available. So that would be provided usually once permission has been granted and they can commit to implementing it.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask for a condition to be put on regarding the muck heap and the disposal of the contents there with it? Thank you.
And that's a pretty standard condition, is it? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so with that condition in mind, I think we'll just do a substantive, we'll do just do the one vote. We don't need to vote on the condition, I think, unless anybody would like to. So if not, then, pardon? Oh, Councillor Frank.
Yeah, I just feel I need to state how I feel about this. I feel uncomfortable with supporting this, listening to the first speaker and reading the comments about drainage, and that we haven't actually arrived at a solution for that yet. And Councillor Clark's lack of confidence in our ability to be compliant with all the restrictions. I also have the same kind of lack of confidence in that. So I'm feeling that it'd be difficult for me to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Franken. Just to comment on those two matters, I think members just need to be mindful. The level of information we have here is generally commensurate with what we receive as part of applications. To require more information is not what we normally have. You know, it's pretty standard to add a condition on to have those technical details, which are generally only drawn up once permission is granted. So I think, you know, I'm concerned members are being unreasonable and asking for a level of detail here that we don't normally have for other applications. So why is this application different? Why are we treating it differently? And the second point is around confidence. You know, really, confidence is not a material planning ground. What is a material planning ground is, are your conditions enforceable? And my colleague has pointed out that if the condition wasn't complied with, if we didn't have the details pre-commencement, there are legitimate enforcement options open to us to serve a breach of condition notice. And if they did implement or didn't comply with drainage, then it may be a condition that goes to the heart of the permission and they lose that. So I think we need to be mindful. And again, it's a pretty standard condition to require those details. It is enforceable. So I think, you know, if it meets the 6 tests, you know, there isn't a 7th test, which is confidence. You know, if it meets the 6 tests, then we can legitimately move forward with that as a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. That was helpful for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Just to clarify, the lack of confidence is because of the past history of the site. The site has a history of not complying, of doing things, and then we are being forced then to react on the back foot. That's where I'm coming from. That's all I'm flagging. It's not lack of confidence in the officers. It's basically, it comes with a bit of both sides obeying the rules. And my concern is that we are playing with one hand strapped behind our back. That's all. That's all I wanted to flag in.
No, thank you. That was understood. Well, maybe, can we just hear this condition, please? Or is it?
For the muck storage, yeah, it would be prior to the first occupation of a stable building, hereby permitted. Details of waste storage and disposal shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The scheme shall be implemented in accordance with approved details and should be retained as such thereafter.
I think I will change my mind. I think we'll vote on that to start with, because people might feel forced to. No one's going to really vote against that, I wouldn't have thought. So, all those in favour of that condition, please.
It's unanimous.
No.
No, Councillor Clark didn't vote.
No, he can't vote.
Oh, sorry, he's not voting. Right, no, that's fine. I knew he was.
But sorry,
Don't worry,
just for clarity.
it is unanimous.
Thank you. So we'll now move to the recommendation to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and to the additional condition. So all those in favour? Um,
8-4.
8-4. Against, please. 2 against.
2 against.
Any abstentions? 1 abstention. And 2 ward members. Cool, thank you very much. Well, I will hand back to the chairman.
Thank you. Just before we move on, I will just point out that the officer is aware of who should and shouldn't be voted, even if you raise your hand. Thank you. And moving on to item number 7, which is DC 240511, which is Wood Grange, Cowfold. Please, could the officer make the presentation, please?
The application relates to a site within the built-up area of Cowfold and a proposal which entails the erection of 2 dwellings to the rear of the site, which is shown in blue, the conversion of an existing coach house to flats, which is shown by the area in orange, the retention of the frontage listed building, which is shown in yellow, with a new detached outbuilding to the rear for 2 parking spaces. It was resolved by Planning Committee South in November 2024 to grant planning permission for development, subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement to secure water neutrality. At this time, the Section 106 agreement was to secure water neutrality through an offsetting scheme in Crawley, which made use of houses in multiple occupation. It has, though, now been proposed that the development would make use of the Sussex North offsetting scheme. This would be secured by a recommended condition, and there is no objection to this approach, which would continue to deliver water neutrality. There have been no further changes to the scheme which would change the previous considerations or resolution, and it is therefore recommended that planning permission be granted as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. There are no registered speakers for this particular application, so I will open it to the Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chairman. I know why it's here, and I know that it's coming back purely for water neutrality and the update to the MPPF. And I'm not going to discuss policy. I'm going to use just a short amount of time to speak on behalf of residents and the parish council. The parish council strongly object to this. This is a Grade 2 listed beautiful building on Henfield Road in Cowfold. They're losing half their garden for this. It's really congested along Henfield Road. We actually at the moment, because it's so congested, because they're just south, further up, there's a car showroom and they park all the cars on the Henfield Road with the problem that although it's 30 miles an hour, people don't respect the speed limit because they spent so long waiting at the entrance to Cowfold that they speed past. And we do have a lot of accidents along there, to the degree that the resident who also wrote in and wrote to me, or actually wrote to the MP who forwarded to Joanne and I, she lives in Summer Meadows, and their exit, which is the other side of the garage, is a nightmare to get out of because they have no line of sight because of the vehicles that are parked. So at this precise moment in time, I suppose it will be to the advantage of this. We have a TRO going through the system to put some WL lines down there to stop the excessive parking. But be that as it may, the resident is very unhappy. Summer Meadows is northwest. They have, I know this is not in a floodplain, and the flooding authority are happy, but the water from Summers Meadow, which although it has permeable surfaces, they're permeable surfaces that are not porous because the water just floods away, and she sent the photographs in as well. So the local residents are not at all happy about it, but be that as it may, there's no policy reasons that I can think of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from Councillor Knoll? Yes.
Was there an aerial photograph that you have that you could go back to, please? Just so we can see where it is. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Any comments from any other members at all? No? Okay, then I propose we go to the vote, and the recommendation is to approve full planning permission subject to appropriate conditions as set out in the committee report. All those for, please show. Those against? Any abstentions?
One abstention.
Thank you very much. Therefore, the recommendation to approve full planning permission subject to appropriate conditions as set out in the committee report has been approved. Only one urgent business from me this evening, just to remind members that the planning meeting on the 3rd of June will start at 6:30 and not 5:30. Thank you. I'd like to thank the officers and members for your contribution this evening and wish you all a safe journey home. And at 18:31, I bring the meeting of the Planning Committee to a close. Thank you very much.